Have we done a poll to confirm that it's everyone's favourite section?
I think so.
I don't think
I've
that's
had
an evidence-based comment.
We got one email, didn't we? Didn't we get one email back from a customer saying it was my favourite set? That's good enough evaluation for me.
Okay, 1 of 1. That's 100%.
100%.
What about if you want to be a guest as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, love it. Yeah.
Although the last guest we've had, I mean, he's...
Yeah.
We'll see how the ratings
recommend
go.
being a guest on the show, actually.
It's a tough gig.
Unless you've got tough skin and you're happy to be roasted regularly.
Yeah.
They will.
Yeah, you got to survive. If you want to be a guest on this podcast, you just have to think, can I pass the Wiki's rant test?
Do I love myself enough to survive the gamut, the gauntlet of criticism and ridicule?
Welcome back to the Capability Corner. This is the podcast where we explore what's happening in healthcare, workforce development, and all things capability building. My name is Zoe Yule. I'm Head of Learning and Capability at Ausmed. I'm joined, as always, by Michelle Wiki, Chief Customer Officer. Welcome, Michelle.
Yo,
how are
what's
you?
Happening? Oh, always brilliant.
Fantastic. I love it. And welcome back to Will Egan, Ausmed CEO.
Great to be here. Really good, really good. Excited for take 2.
Take 2 of more AI. We're back. Unfortunately, we haven't got Dr. Karen Patterson, Chief Nursing Officer, with us today.
Boo.
I
But she'll be
know.
listening. Hey,
She
Kaz.
will be listening. So we should do a shout out to Karen instead. Shout out to Karen.
I just did. I said, hey, Kaz.
I think she needs a bit more than that though, Michelle.
Oh, okay.
Poor Karen is unwell, so we did decide the show must go on. So here we have it, part 2 of AI governance. But first, what's everyone been up to?
I mean, if you're following me on LinkedIn, it's all happening for me. Had a little chat with the air call people the other day. That's our telephony system. And we were talking AI, agentic AI. That was exciting. And they sent me a little gift. That was also very exciting. So anyway, connect with me on LinkedIn to go check that out. But look, life goes on, doesn't it, Zoe? People stall, people watch, people progress a little bit. And I'm just being a part of it and trying to just herd the cats, push the herd, all that kind of stuff.
It's end of quarter, so I'm busy. I'm trying to smash out some projects that I've been working on. We did have a very special announcement yesterday. What went live, Will? What were you so excited?
Ausmed Perform,
Woo!
a new product, which is really exciting. I think that's been being worked on for maybe more than 12 months, potentially 15. It was a really good one as well. It came about through a number of customer suggestions, and we put together a pilot group, maybe June, July last year, and then worked with them over the last 12 to 15 months to build that up. And it's absolutely crushing it. It's taken off really, really fast.
It's hit the ground running.
And Michelle knows all about it. The
very
onboardings
well,
are hard.
isn't
Hey?
it?
It's well, look, there's complexity to it because everyone knows performance appraisals, performance management, performance everything is complicated in the healthcare system. Accessing the people, trying for them to access managers, for managers to be on top of learning, development plans, succession planning. It's complicated. So this is why I think it has landed so well, is that it's really meeting a need in an interface that especially our people, but across the board audience are really finding easy to access, easy to, I don't know, I'm going to repeat the word, but interface with. And so, I think that's where we've hit the right tone, and we're going to be able to deliver some awesome business efficiencies because of that piece. So yeah, super exciting.
Learning and development, a lot of effort goes into the learning side, but there's not a lot that goes into the development side.
So true.
It's kind of the bit you get to once you've done the learning.
Yeah.
If you get time.
Did you plan that bit? Because that's a really good one. I like that.
We've also got a very exciting day tomorrow. We've got Ausmed's first AI hackathon. Some really, really exciting ideas that we're going to be shaping really cool solutions for. So I think we can certainly give our listeners a bit of a taste to how this day went on the next episode. But for now...
Look at you. What a tease.
Oh, I know. For now, we are going to jump back into AI. I feel like this whole podcast in could be on AI. But what we want to have another discussion about today is really thinking more about what actually is it? What is generative learning? How are we thinking about the use of AI within the learning experience? We will come back to some of the risks and how to do it safely. But I'm going to hand it over to you. Will, first tell us, define it. What is generative learning?
Generative learning essentially is a learning experience where the information and the assessment, so the content and the assessment, is contextualized around the learner by essentially pairing private data or the kind of traditional content objects that we would produce with an LLM, and then giving that over to the LLM to run an experience designed to meet the learner where they're at and then push them to the next kind of level on a skill or competency, or any other objective in a learning paradigm.
Why use AI why bring AI into a learning environment? What are some of the benefits that you can get from this?
If we could, we would be trying to teach people these skills in person, one-to-one, or in a tutoring type environment. If we could do that and there was an economic basis to do that, we would be doing that. But it's too expensive, workforces are too large, and information needs to flow far more quickly than the time it would take for that type of a program to run. Like, you need your whole workforce to know something new or a new policy or procedure, the moment it goes live, within a couple of days, weeks. If you were to try and coordinate face-to-face training, which is the other option you'd have, that would take months, really. And then there'd all be all those annoying admin bits where some people didn't make it, they didn't show up, and now, it's just starting to get hard to manage.
Oh, not to mention access for, remote communities, regional communities, occasional workers, overtime workers, weekend workers. Then inside that, let's be honest, subjective bias, unconscious bias with humans, we're going to be limiting that by using Gen AI. So I think those are all the reasons why this is a valuable tool.
What I've always wanted to do in learning, being in this environment of Ausmed, of being the provider that's creating the learning, but not actually delivering that training, is to be a fly on the wall a month or 2 months later after that learning's been done and thought, I wonder if they're actually doing it. Did what we do as a provider actually result in an improvement in knowledge or skill or change practice? And I think we're a lot closer to answering those questions by using generative AI.
Definitely. I think, though, when we took that learning out of the face-to-face kind of environment, and that was happening probably for 2 decades before COVID, slowly, but COVID just accelerated. It just moved, all of it online within the space of a year or two. We basically put down a lot of that type of benefit that you're describing in exchange for the efficiency or productivity gains that stemmed from being able to standardize it and get it all done faster. But the problem with that form of learning is it's static. Right? Everyone gets the same piece of content, doesn't matter what level they're at. The content doesn't change based on how a learner indicates their level of knowledge or comprehension. So it's no longer dynamic. It's not built around their specific context, the people that they care for, what they already know, what they don't know. So generative learning is essentially the practice of taking the LLM, a large language model, putting it inside the learning experience, fine-tuning it and training it so that it can perform in that way, in a personalized and contextualized way to that learner and to that workplace or to that kind of consumer group.
Will, can you talk about some of those ingredients that are needed within generative learning, and just define those for our listeners?
The first one that we start with is essentially a learning objective. So if you just kind of compare these two worlds side by side, static content and then generative learning experiences or generative content. First thing, constant between the two, a learning objective or learning outcome, some sort of goal from the learning. Other things that start to flow into the generative side are a rubric, which helps us understand what different levels of comprehension look like. So a rubric is an assessment tool. It drives standardization across assessments. It's used extensively in the academic setting, but it's not, prominent in an aged care or home care or healthcare setting. We talk just really there about completion rates, which is true, false, did someone do the module? The rubric essentially contains a list of domains, and then inside each domain, there's a statement around what a learner would have to demonstrate or show across different degrees of competence or capability in that domain, from like low or poor or needs improvement all the way up to excellent. So that's a second thing. The third is we obviously have to give these LLMs a role. We have to almost coach them, or fine tune them is a term that's sometimes used, around their role in that learning experience. You know, are they a mentor? Are they a manager? Are they a resident? Are they a patient? Are they an auditor? And then we have to give them a script. What is it? What is their task? What do they have to actually do or perform? If it's a simulation, we're giving them a script. If it's not a simulation and it's essentially an assessment, then we're giving it the assessor role. We're giving it a question that it needs to evaluate a response, a learner response to, using that rubric. And then there's a couple of other things that go into that as well. Behaviours that we don't want it to perform, and then some kind of governance things that we'll come to later on in the talk.
It's really clear that by adding these ingredients together, we're able to do some of the things that really matter to learning at scale. What's the technology that's making all of this possible?
Fundamentally, it's the large language model. So if you think about the classification here, it's a branch of computer science, artificial intelligence. It's a sub-branch of that, which is generative artificial intelligence, or Gen AI, which is the kind of realm that large language models sit in. And then there's a sub-branch of that, which is generative learning experiences. So we're talking about a level below the LLM. It's taking the LLM and applying it in the context of learning. In a sense, it's an application layer sitting on top of a large language model. It's a use case for a large language model. Essentially, when you get that LLM to work on the problems that we have in a hospital or in a residential aged care setting or a disability care setting, they appear, they're really, really good at appearing to simulate or present like an auditor or a patient or a resident, or a manager or a staff member, or whatever role it is that they take.
I think for our healthcare listeners, it's a really important point to clarify, or maybe just share a little bit more about. And that's, you mentioned that you're adding private data to an LLM. Now, maybe a few ears prick up and wonder, what exactly do you mean by that? Are you talking, private learning data or a policy? How does that work within the learning experience? And can you walk us through what that might mean? Because for some people that might sound a little bit scary, but equally exciting at the same time.
Well, maybe I'll bring Michelle in. What comes to your mind when you hear private data in the context of the LLM?
No, I think it's a great point, Zoe. I was talking about this the other day, just in terms of the fundamentals around LLMs. What's closed circuit? What's not closed circuit? What's safe to reveal? What's the governance policy for your org, and what can be shared and can't be shared? So for me, like when I break it down really super simply, there's a closed setup and there's an open setup, and when you use your login in Chappy, as everyone knows Chappy, or some other LLM, and it's just your personal email, you haven't paid for anything, then that can then get sourced and pulled and sampled from the wider LLM or the interwebs. Alternatively, you have a closed circuit, which is where you've purchased, or your business has purchased something that's kind of shut down. It will still pull from what's outside, but it won't push anything or release anything that you've put inside. There should still be constraints around what you use, or there may still be constraints around what you use. I might not upload my customer data, or I might not upload my numbers, even though I could theoretically trust it. There'll be rules or should be governance around those elements. But at a broad theory, the closed circuit will not pull anything out of your system to push for anyone else to pull into theirs, but will still be pulling from the wider view into yours.
That's spot on. And then if you expand that out into an application layer, that same concept, essentially, if we were to just put a large language model inside a learning environment or inside a learning management system, how is that any better than you doing that in ChatGPT or Copilot? Right? It's not. You get the exact same outcomes. But if we take information inside the LMS or inside the module and we give that to the LLM, and then we create really tight lanes around how we want the module to use that data, we can build far more sophisticated experiences. I'll give you a simple example. Imagine you could upload a policy to Ausmed, and then we use the information inside that policy. We give an LLM the task to extract the key concepts, and then we supply the private data of Ausmed's content library, including any modules that you've uploaded, and we use the private data of your policy to match the private data of the modules in our system, both of which are not known to an LLM that's just running on the open web. The LLM performs really, really well at doing that mapping exercise. So for example, we could build a training plan by you uploading a policy to the system. We could say, these are the 3 items, these are the job roles in your organization that we think that this relates to. This is their duration. You could ask it to find an alternative. We can suggest alternatives. So we're getting the LLM to do the work, kind of starts to step into that agentic space, getting the LLM to do the work. But we're doing that by providing it with private data that it wouldn't have access to out on the open web. And just to be clear and to reiterate Michelle's point, of course, all of that's secure. We're not just handing data over.
Everything at Ausmed that gets done in this space is operating in that closed system. And we just went through ISO 27001, didn't we? So
90210. Yep.
No, we are absolutely, thinking about information security and governance when it comes to data and using AI. I want to tap into some of these safety considerations, which we do talk about a lot. We're learning a lot. But we've mentioned a couple of key terms. One was guardrails. Can we start there and just try and get our heads around what a guardrail is and how we're using it within the generative learning experience?
If you're a good driver, you drive on a road and there's these like low level metal things that usually are galvanized steel because that's best for weatherproof. And they've got these funny little looped in horizontal pieces that run, and then these vertical pieces. And when you veer off the road, which some people do, so we're not mentioning any names, you'll come up against the guardrail and it stops you falling off the edge of the road, presuming there's not a wide shoulder and there's a long fall. So using that term, when we talk about guardrails, for me, it's like, here's a road, this is where I'm meant to be. There's a small, hopefully for me, there's a wide shoulder, which is like the asphalty, non-tarred section, and then there's a guardrail. So my aim is to stay on the road. There's a little bit of leeway. I think Will would like it to be a really small shoulder. I want it to be a really big shoulder. And then there's a guardrail that stops me falling off the side of the mountain and bringing Ausmed into disrepute. So just to, clarify the analogy for everyone, the guardrails keep us travelling in the right direction on the right safety setting. What those guardrails are in terms of how your road is governed by it and what you need to be held by will be up to your organisation in terms of policy, and I'll let Will speak to that. But just to, clarify.
No, it's a good analogy.
Guardrails.
I think the other thing that's helpful with those things on the side of the road is if you try and crash into them, they kind of throw your car back into the road, aka keeping you on track.
How would you know that, Will?
Oh, I don't know. I suppose that's how they're designed. But that's what they are in terms of the metaphor stands, in the case of the large language models. So, old world, there's static content. You know exactly what's in it. It doesn't change ever when it's presented to the learner. Pretty important when the facts need to be correct. They don't need to be interpreted. They just need to be what they are. Pretty important when it's a compliance paradigm. You need to be 100% certain about what's actually delivered. And I don't see that changing in those worlds, right? But then there's putting that information into practice. And that's the thing we lost when we left the classroom. But then there's putting that learning, those concepts into practice. Right? And that's never been possible before. I mean, basic assessment, drag and drop, multiple choice questions, those things are full of the cues. They have the answer in them, versus what's now possible where we're not giving you the answer. So the issue then becomes, the new issue that you're exposed to is you don't know how the LLM is going to behave in that setting, right? And you can do all of the fine tuning and all of the coaching and kind of prompting around creating like some clear boundaries around where you want the LLM to go, but the LLM responds to the user prompt as well, which is what the learner says back. So the role of the guardrails is essentially to define a set of things that you don't want the LLM to do. So that might be, for example, mention medications. If it randomly gets asked by a user to give recommendations around a medication, it just will not do that. So these are kind of like hard stops. So the nuance here is which ones are you running at runtime and which ones are you running post interaction, so after the fact. Right? In our case, there's some that we believe should be running at runtime that are low latency but high risk. And then there's a whole set that could actually be run after the fact and be given back to that learner as part of the feedback. Here's how you performed in this simulation, but here's some actual flags that went off. You breached our policy on this, etc.
There's clearly trade-offs when we're talking about safety and efficacy of a generative learning experience, and a lot to think of. What I've been very impressed with over the past week is that we're on the cusp of releasing a new question type. And that was a little bit of a drum roll. There's been about a week delay of getting this feature live, and the reason why is that there has been so much additional testing and checking and something called jailbreaking attempts. So with this new feature, the delay's been a few days now because we keep just checking, can we jailbreak it? Can we try and circumvent some of those guardrails and system prompts? And the team are testing to make sure that we can't. And we could still jailbreak it yesterday. So we're still testing, we're still waiting, we're still reviewing that code. So I've been very, very impressed. Normally I'm not impressed with delays about things going live. But I have been, because I think it's really showing the governance that's at play here. So what do you do with the guardrails? Like, how do you know that someone's hit them or not? And if someone crashes, what happens next?
Yeah, good question. So it is a governance situation, right? Firstly, you've got to measure it, record it, see if it takes place. But this is that human in the loop concept. This is where that steps in. So essentially, in our implementation, we provide transcripts back to organisation managers. We obviously monitor them internally at Ausmed as well. We're looking for when those guardrails have been tripped. I kind of almost think of them as tripwires or lines, like we saw this go off. Our clinical education team, our content team, they'll come in and look at that and see if there's any improvements to the rubric or to the prompting or the fine tuning that we've done on that instance of an LLM running in a module. To try and ameliorate that risk, but the same applies to the customer. That's all of this is traceable, and you might get to a point where you decide that this is not the correct approach for a particular area of high risk, or you might be pleasantly surprised and see, in the big scheme of things, error rates are very, very low. So, but that's where the human kind of role steps in around governance. You're not going to be able to govern tens of thousands of interactions. So the guardrails help you whittle that down to, the 0.5% that you might need to take a look at.
I wonder, when we're thinking about integrating these generative learning experiences within, Ausmed, is there a model? Is there a set of standards like our national quality standards? Is there some reference that we can use that sort of gives us that minimum level of safety or assurance that, hey, what we're doing is correct?
The Stanford MedHelm framework is a good one to take a look at. That is essentially an independent benchmarking exercise or evaluation or evals tool. Stanford's team is running any new model through that, giving it a score. Ausmed's typically picking and switching to the higher scoring models, whilst also looking at cost implications of that as well.
I think, and I hope what our listeners are experiencing is some really, really big, meaty questions that are so relevant that when it comes to AI, we've been doing a lot of learning. I hope we've been able to share some of just the background to what our our learners and our partners, our organisations will begin to see, and that is some generative learning features going live across the coming couple of months here at Ausmed. We're working on some really exciting things, some new question formats that involve responsive coaching and feedback that the learner receives, and some really exciting stuff around simulation that help unlock some of those so what questions. So what that someone's done some mandatory compliance training. Has it actually worked? Is it effective? Are they starting to apply some of that knowledge and skill into practice? So a little bit of a sense for all of the very important considerations around risk, governance and safety that are going on here in the background at Ausmed as we build on these generative learning features and implement generative learning across the platform. It's time for your favourite section, this week's Wiki Rant.
I'm going to keep it short because the fact is I keep harping on the same thing. I've got to find something new to rant about because we're all getting a bit bored. As we keep talking about AI and everyone's getting bored about AI, I keep ranting about AI and everyone's getting bored about the rant. But I guess I would bring it back to this part where when you get frozen from worry, frozen from the risk you might be taking, you're still not progressing, you're still not engaging, you're still not trying this stuff. And so, you know, we're talking about guardrails, we're talking about closed systems, and then you're thinking, oh no, well, then I better not do it, or I'm not really sure, or I don't know whether, you know, we've got the policy, I don't know what the policy says, so I just won't touch it at all. And again, then people are still stagnating and frozen in this AI space, in this progress space where they're not going anywhere. Saying that you don't want to breach risk, you don't want to breach IP, is just pretending that you're being risk averse, are worried about the compliance or the risk appetite of the business, when really find out what the policy says, test it. I'll tell you right now, we have a closed chappy. I go into it all the time and just suss out, what are people talking about Will Egan about? What are people complaining about Zoe about this week? What does everyone inside Ausmed think about Michelle Wiki? And it gives me nothing every time. So it's worked out that it needs to not only be closed to the outside, but it needs to be closed to Michelle Wiki as well, and not reveal any of the secrets that people are writing.
Have you tried to jailbreak Chappie this week?
Oh, without a doubt. I don't know why you haven't asked me to jailbreak things, because that's my
You're really
MO.
good at it.
My point is, if you're worried about something, try it, then test it. Like, put something out there, throw out a red herring and see whether it's going to pick up in some other LLM or in some other investigation, and see where it goes from there. But the more you sit back and wonder, the more you sit back and you're scared, the more you're going to be lost. And I know, last point, I know many of us are tired of the AI conversation, but we're having the AI conversation because this is not going away. This is only getting bigger and more established in our way of doing things. And maybe we're at a peak and it will settle and stabilise into a new way of norm, but it will not go away and not be there at all. It will not blow out, dissolve, resolve, distinguish, etc. So we are talking about it because this is the new normal. Get on the train or you will fall over the guardrail and down the side of the cliff, not to be seen of again.
Off the freeway.
Join
Absolutely.
It's not that it's also not just going away. Like, I think a good place for me to like hang my hat up on this podcast, my sign off would just be three predictions for the future. One, this is a bubble and it'll burst. I believe that. So there's a day in the future where all of the newspaper stories are AI is a big fraud, or look at all this money that was lost in AI. But that doesn't mean the technology is a fraud. It just means it was over invested in, right? So that won't be validating that this is going away.
Your analogy is rubbish, Will. If it's a balloon that will burst, the balloon is filled with confetti. So when it bursts, there's still going to be a scattering of the evidence and the traces of the issue. There's no air, and one small piece of rubber. I just want to say there's leftovers, right? It can't be
There's
nothing
leftovers.
at the
Yeah,
end
that's
of the
right.
bursting.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
That's true. It's not all hot air, but there's a lot of kind of meta stuff going on in this space. There's something around 350 billion US of capital allocated to investing in generative AI, and there's $35 billion of revenue being produced. These are the numbers I've heard. 10 billion of that 35 is Microsoft paying OpenAI for Copilot credits. So even if it is 35, that implies a 10% ROI. No technology product has a 10-year lifespan. It's more like 3 to 5, especially with the rate that NVIDIA is innovating in these chips. So where's the payback coming from? Thing two, it's not going away, but productivity is a word on our lips here in Australia at the moment. And the bad news is productivity in the aged care sector or in health, age and disability is down 2% in the last 10 years. So non-market productivity is down 2%. Market productivity is only up about 4%. Productivity is critical. And, I think that part of that productivity is all this digital paperwork that we want to get rid of, but we still find ourselves doing. So that's a perfect use case for LLMs. So I think that's why it's not going away.
AI is here, it's staying. I hope for many of our listeners, some of the potential fear or concern about this has dissipated, and instead there's some excitement, there's more depth and understanding around when we're talking about AI specifically within healthcare. We can talk about it in many different ways. Here at Ausmed, we're talking about generative learning, and we're talking about the opportunities that generative learning offers us in terms of extending learning from the learning experience and into practice, supporting with knowledge retention, reducing Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve and giving knowledge boosts. It's enabling a lot more effectiveness around learning to be built into the learning experience. So supporting us to do many of the things that certainly here at Ausmed we've wanted to do for a long time, what we've done within the physical face-to-face events experience, and now bringing that to an online screen or mobile somewhere near you.
That was beautiful, Zoe.
Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate the support. So on that note, I'm going to throw it over. You can make one more final point, Will. Would you like to finish it off with one short key message before I wrap up today's show?
I think just Google generative learning if you want to know more. That's keep inquiring. I think the future is a world where you don't just have static content, you have dynamic, contextualized content that your learners are engaging with. And we're calling that generative learning, and we're noticing other innovative players in this space also coining it. Having a proper noun to describe and kind of aggregate all of this stuff together is useful. Generative learning.
We'd love to hear from you if you've got any thoughts on today's episode, a hot take, feedback, feelings, concerns, considerations. Reach out to us, podcast@ausmed.com.au. Thanks for joining us today. Follow us on LinkedIn for more insights and updates. You can also follow Will Egan on LinkedIn and Michelle Wiki on LinkedIn. They're big posts, big posters. I'm a little dormant at the moment, but I'm working my way back into LinkedIn, and subscribe to the Ausmed Toolbox for lots of articles and resources. If you're heading to or have just attended Aging Australia, hope you popped by. If you were lucky enough to come to our Workforce Capability and AI event, I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll let you know how the AI hackathon that Ausmed is running went, and share some of the exciting and novel ideas that came from that. Thank you, and see you next time.
Bye. Thanks, Nick. Bye.